Good evening, all of you all. My name is Zainab Patel, and I am joined today with J. Suresh. And in absentia, we have Amy Suri, who couldn't join our panel today due to an unexpected hospitalization. We hope that she's recovering and would be fit and fine as we go live on this session. So, before I introduce myself, I would like Suresh to quickly tell us a little bit about himself and how he would aptly describe himself before I shoot out and talk about myself. Suresh, over to you, please.
Sure. Thank you, Zainab. And firstly, I'd also like to thank Pride Circle for inviting me to the session here. A bit about myself. So I'm Major J. Suresh, retired otherwise officially, but I'm fine with Suresh these days. I served in the Indian Army for about 11 and a half years and followed by a short stint in Amazon, after which I studied for about a year at IMB doing an executive MBA. I'm currently working with an MNC, and I'm gay, and I came out publicly on NDTV through a blog as well as an interview. And the reason I did that is, one, I wanted to be honest about myself. Second, I felt that my story could touch the lives of other gay officers and soldiers who are currently serving in the military or who had served in the past, and certainly folks, young gay men who might be aspiring to join the military. It could touch them as well. And the third reason I did that is because I feel, in today's world with social acceptance levels improving, it's time that LGBT folks led their lives more openly and freely with their head held high. So that's a little bit about myself, Sana. How about a little bit about you?
A big salute to you, Suresh. I also happen to have um, a friend who's more like a brother, and he also served a 15-year commission with the armed forces.
Okay.
He retired now as a proud gay man, and
Okay.
he continues to work in a civilian job. A little
Okay.
bit about me. My name is Zainab Patel. Currently, I lead inclusion and diversity for a very large management consulting firm, KPMG. Prior to this, I had the good fortune of serving with the United Nations, both in India and in the Asia Pacific region. Worked on areas of gender, ability, caste, human rights, social development, and HIV. So for me, it's been quite a big journey as a trans woman to move from a non-government organization to a bilateral, multilateral organization, and then finally, coming into the private sector space. I also enjoy a little bit of community activism, and was one of the imp leaders in the NALSA versus the Union of India case on transgender rights. So that was a little bit about me. But in my spare time, I also love writing shairis,
Wow.
putting all sorts of crazy videos on TikTok. But unfortunately, there's a ban on TikTok now. But I do sneak in a video once in a while on Instagram and hide most of my official colleagues from it. So that was about me.
Thanks, Anna. And I think what you haven't mentioned is that you have inspired a lot of people through your various talks, including TED Talks, right? So I'm sure a lot of people in the LGBT community, especially trans folks in India, derive a lot of inspiration from you.
Thank you, Suresh, for those kind words. I believe my TikTok videos are also inspiration to quite a few colleagues of mine who are working overseas, who keep sending me these videos and say how interesting I am in that. Um, so folks listening in today, we were initially scheduled to have a panel discussion, but now we will proceed with an interesting fireside chat between Suresh and me, trying to understand and unravel what we understand by intersectionality. So, I come from the development sector. Um, we've been Christian, so as it's so, by saying that you come in with the currency of ideas and vocabulary and different kinds of words and jargons that you throw at people. And interestingly for me, intersectionality and the way I hear about it, or the way I've experienced it, it kind of made a debut in the late 80s. It kind of almost bulldozed its way through into sociology courses in college campus, around anthropology, etc. It's become, when I was working in the United Nations, when I was working in the civil society space, it became a buzzword. And it became a buzzword for anyone dealing with, say, an identity politics. It became a caste issue, it became a religion issue, it became a geographical issue. And all through my journey in the UN from 2009 to 2019, I was also introduced to it, fairly late in my professional life. And the moment I heard about it, it was kind of groundbreaking for me, because for me it was synonymous with me in many ways. It encompassed me. It gave me a sense of dynamism. It made sense to me. It perfectly summed up the conflicting aspects that is part of one's being. You know, makes sense for us how race, class, body type, socioeconomic status, gender, religion, sexual orientation, sex characteristics, ethnicity can overlap and affect how other people perceive you. But I also do understand that intersectionality is a hard concept to grasp for many people. And many of you who are in the audience listening to you will find it difficult to grasp the concept. But to be able to look at this, one has to combine the perception with privilege. And with that, you will have a perfect recipe for misinterpretation and disaster. Some believe that by claiming a minority status, their experience within a minority identity is representative of people's experience of that minority group. Some people may think the opposite. But for me, we wanted to together, Suresh and I wanted to explore some of the contours of intersectionality, especially when it comes to the issue of LGBTIQ people. And, I was thinking of three words, and that's privilege, power, and pride. So using that as the background, let me focus on starting with Suresh and asking him, Suresh, what would it be to mention your journey of self-realization of your own identity, wherever you may fit through in the LGBTIQ spectrum?
Sure, Zainab. So, I mean, if I recall, my life, my journey initially through my younger days, as a young boy, I just had that feeling that I was a little different. I was a little introverted. I was a little quiet. I was more into academics, more, not much into sports, maybe a little bit of badminton, table tennis, and maybe some, co-curricular activities like debating, painting. So all in all, I just felt I was a little different from the other boys, but nothing more than that at that stage, because you really don't have that awareness at such a young age, right? However, in my teenage years, when generally we become more sexually aware, that's when I started realizing that I'm feeling same-sex attraction. Then I was attracted to this rather cute-looking boy in class, and what followed was a minor bullying incident, which left me, physically it was hardly anything serious, but emotionally it left me quite repressed. So as a result, through my late teenage years and through my early 20s, I did not feel any romantic attraction or love for anybody. I mean, maybe those feelings had all got repressed. However, but by my mid 20s, when those feelings started resurfacing, that's the time I started coming to terms with the fact that I was gay. Of course, the environment that I was in, which was a very straight environment of the military, made it even more difficult. So there were times when I've indulged in heavy drinking to get over that doubt in myself, or accepting myself, right? Those struggles. And then I decided, when I finally accepted myself, okay, I said, okay, I'll maybe have to keep this to myself. But it wasn't easy, because that was the time my parents wanted to get me married, and uh, I wrote back to them saying that there is a reason I can't get married, but unfortunately I can't tell you that. And it was a very sad letter, but little did I know that they are not going to stop at just because I'm requesting not to get married. So one of the times I came back on leave from some place I was posted, I came home on leave, and then they had already arranged a meeting with one girl's family. They'd done their bit of bride hunting. So I wanted to come out to them at that time and say that, I don't want to get married. It would have been very shocking for them. So I played along that one time. I went to see the girl. Of course, my parents had done their research, well educated girl, beautiful, and well, good family and all of that. But one look at her and I felt that I don't want to cheat this person. I don't want to lead a double life. I'm not going to, you know, cheat my parents and cheat myself and cheat this girl and lead a double life. So I came out to them, and so ever since then I've generally been more at peace. Of course, I came out more publicly later, but I mean, self acceptance happened maybe in the mid 20s, and coming out to my closest folks in my life happened a few years after that. And if I might ask you in the same vein, Zainab, I'm sure there must be some difficulties you must have faced in your journey towards self-acceptance, right? So can you describe to us how your journey towards self-acceptance was?
Thank you, Suresh. My journey was relatively, more prudent, I may say so, because I did not have a choice of hiding who I was, or becoming invisible or stuff like that. So unfortunately or fortunately for me, I always knew that if there was something that I wanted to be, it would be I wanted to be a woman. And that throughout my childhood, throughout my adolescent years, all throughout my growing up years and my adulthood, it's only been a long journey. Starting off with facing the fact that you are not the only effeminate or gender non-conforming person around. I think I was born in a Catholic family, went to a Christian education, brought up in a society where we didn't have very strict gender norms, but one was expected to adhere to whatever has been stereotyped for that. Had frequent run-ins within my religion, with my instructors telling me about how God has made only man and woman, and then people like you are misfits, are not going to enter God's kingdom, or trying to then be sent. And this is, in fact, I've never spoken about it, but today, since I've been at one point of time, in an attempt to so-called cure me, my parents also packed me off to a seminary boarding school in Lonavala to kind of see if religion and the theology of the church would help convert me, as sort. Battle that, had suicidal ideations, grew up to college, dropped out of college, moved out of home, essentially went in the search of being me. And then finally me finding myself dealing with a lot of internalized homophobia and transphobia myself, to getting to work around those issues, working on issues of self-acceptance. So I think there were many times I came out. And these were not in terms of coming out as a trans woman or a woman or whatever. I think I came out at various points of time repeatedly to my friends, to my family, to my workspaces, to my colleagues, to the society, because they needed constant reiteration. So I think till I die, it is going to be a constant journey of reiteration of my identity. And if the lack of any other appropriate word, or the current limited vocabulary that we use is coming out, then yes, I will keep coming out till the day there is no longer a need for me to come out anymore.
True. Yeah. Go ahead.
So that is my coming out story. But technically, I only came out once of my mother's womb 40 years ago.
Right.
That's just it for me.
Right.
So if you would permit me now to ask you another question, which has been quite a bit of, things that we intend to do, things that we want to do, things that make social sense, business sense. And Suresh, what are the few things that organization, whether they are corporate, etc., can do to foster inclusion, say for someone like you, someone who is from the veteran community? And specifically, you in your introductory remarks in this little journey that you shared about us, what is it? What are the factors? How did you navigate? What kind of factored in the you put in when you had to navigate your space as a gay man, as a veteran? What were the challenges around
Sure, Zainab. So one of the things I would say, before I get into my own journey as a veteran and as a, gay veteran, would be that in general, I think there is a very little understanding in the civilian arena about what military service involves, or what the military's operations are all about, or what do people do in the military. It's almost felt that it's another world by itself, like it's some Mars or Jupiter or something like that. Whereas truth is, yes, there are a lot of things in the military that are different, but there are a lot of things that the military does, and the folks in the military do, that are sort of similar to what we do in the civilian industries, or the corporate world for that matter, whether it is things like people management or operations management, or project management, information security, or for that matter even quality and manufacturing related work. These are all things that folks in the military also do. So whereas the awareness on that is quite low, so I feel one of the things that folks who come out from the military need to especially find challenging is how to rephrase what you have done in a terminology that civilians understand. Because if we try and put it exactly in the military terminology, it will not be understood. So it has to be firstly translated into civilian jargon, so that it is relatable to work that happens in the civilian arena. And of course, after that, it is a little difficult, like I said, because there are pre-existing notions about how the military is very different. So corporations are not always very keen to hire folks from the military from a military background. And of course, that's where two things work. One is either referrals, people, there are enough and more people like me who are already who have exited the military and are now working in the civilian arena. So people who are coming out today of the military and looking for a new second innings should use those networks. And in addition, I feel that organizations also need to make an endeavor to understand the work of the military better, because if they do that, they are looking at a pool of people who are highly trainable, highly adaptable, highly committed and motivated. So it's a very rich talent pool that they can tap into. And that's where I feel even intermediary organizations like maybe the FICCI or other industry bodies can play a role of sort of connecting the military and the civilian organizations in various industries, whether it's manufacturing, information technology, you name it. So those linkages have to get stronger, is what I feel. I don't know if it answers the question you.
Well, it did answer a lot on the veteran part, but do you think there were some additional factors you had to put into place for you to be able to navigate the space as a open gay man? Because I was because you came out, and I believe there must be some challenges.
Right. No, you're right. And I apologize, I missed that part of the question. So I think I might be possibly the only openly gay, ex-military guy in India at the moment, though it's not very uncommon in the other parts of the world, especially in the Western world, or for that matter in Southeast Asia. A lot of folks in the military are either serving openly, when they're openly gay, or they are out after the military service and they're open about it. In India, it's a little difficult because the military's policy is still not favorable to being open about it. It's quite discriminatory, and that's a separate topic by itself. But all I'd say is that people often find it difficult, especially because awareness in India is a little still on the rise. It is still not where we would want it to be on LGBT matters. So people often find it difficult to reconcile the two parts of my identity, one as a gay person and one as a veteran. So can these two exist together? It often becomes a big question mark for many of them. And and so often I have to explain to people, who say, how was it, and do you think, firstly, is it okay for people to serve openly in the military? I say it should be. I mean, the military, of course, needs to change, and their policies need to change, because the experience in a lot of countries has shown that there is no problem at all if you let LGBT people serve openly. And in fact, if they continue with the policy of not allowing them to serve openly, it is in a way against their interest, because a lot of the human resources, the people in the military whom they have trained with so much effort, whether it's fighter pilots, or some linguistic experts, or for that matter even trained soldiers, commandos, people like that, they would end up losing those people if they don't let them serve openly, right? So that's one thing. And the last part I would say is that in my case also, I have to try and explain to people that it shouldn't matter, because firstly, the experience in many countries, including in the West and in Southeast Asia, has shown that it doesn't matter. And as long as somebody is professionally committed, professionally good at his job, as I was mentioning, Zanab, I think the experience in many of the Western countries and some of the Southeast Asian countries has shown that letting people serve openly, LGBT people serve openly in the military, has not posed any challenges. In fact, it has helped them to retain resources, precious resources, who would have been trained with a lot of effort and money, like fighter pilots or commandos or linguistic experts or intelligence experts. A lot of such people who are they could be in various branches of the army, all of them, or the military. All of them would have been trained through a lot of years. So it's an opportunity for them to retain that talent if they let them serve openly. uh, and the last thing I wanted to mention is that so one thing that I often have to tell people when they realize that I'm gay as well as a veteran is that strictly speaking, it shouldn't matter, because anybody who's in the military and LGBT, as long as they are professional, committed and good at their job and dedicated, physically fit, and fit in every which way to do their job, it really shouldn't matter. And it's only then that people begin to understand that yes, it's strictly speaking, it is really not a factor.
Right, Suresh. I have one more follow-up question to you. Since you mentioned what are the difficulties and challenges around some of the intersectionality, but how can workplaces better support the LGBTIQ community, and how do they look at intersectionality in building inclusion programs? I just thought there was a link to the previous question, and this would make more logical flow.
Right. So, I mean, I would like to believe that based on whatever I've seen in my corporate experiences, that lately, at least in the last 3-4 years, a lot of organizations have become quite serious about diversity and inclusion. The intent is very strong, and they are realizing that yes, there are so many aspects to diversity. So they are embracing diversity in a big way, which is good, because strictly speaking, it makes a lot of business sense as well. One, the customer base is diverse, so unless your workforce is diverse, which can bring in that perspective of what the diverse customer is looking for, it would not be easy for companies to plan their strategies and their products accordingly, or design their products accordingly, right? So it makes business sense from that angle. So that business sense has certainly been understood. But especially if you ask me about industries in India or companies in India, there's a lot of progress yet to be made, because we are still at an early stage. So companies may have formed ERGs, they're displaying that intent, they're going about spreading awareness. But I think some of the areas where they can do more is especially on inclusion. So diversity, hiring people who are different is one thing, making them feel included is another thing altogether, right? So and that's where a greater awareness, especially in the larger workforce, which may be straight, if I speak about it purely from a LGBT perspective, then what I would say is that the larger state majority still doesn't have a very good understanding about what LGBT stands for, or IQ stands for, right? So from the basics to a general increasing the general awareness would help people to relate to LGBT folks better. So that will improve acceptance, right? And that will improve inclusion. And the narratives that people have in their workplaces, they can be more inclusive rather than just saying, okay, how was your boyfriend, how was your girlfriend? I mean, things like those especially in team meetings, right? Those people shouldn't feel left out because okay, they think that I'm not in the category, and they are not willing to reveal about themselves. That is one. Two, even on the hiring front, I would feel that companies need to go out and actively seek people with a difference, because uh, organizations, especially like Pride Circle, are the pioneers in this space of furthering LGBT inclusion. So companies have this big opportunity to actually walk the talk, and let people who are openly out, either as lesbian and gay, or as trans, or any other dimension of sexuality for that matter, uh, if they hire them, then in the long run they will reap the benefits of a diverse workforce, different perspective, right? Different, and that will further lead to better discussions on various decisions, and better decisions ultimately, right? So that's how I would put it. Any thoughts you have, especially since Zainab, you are leading the diversity, and you're leading the diversity and inclusion function in an important company. So how has your journey been, and what would you say are some of the things that, I mean, not specifically to KPMG, but I'm sure you interact with other D&I leaders as well, right? So what do you think are some of the focus areas that corporates need to focus on from LGBT inclusion standpoint?
I think the fact is that, we are in the journey of building self-awareness and psychological safety for all. But one has to realize that psychological safety is not only governed by aspects of sexual orientation, actual or perceived, or gender identity and expression. It's often an overlap of various conditioning. Like, I have a Muslim name because my partner is a Muslim. And often there are situations when one has to deal with Islamophobia to deal with it. See, I am a Sufi at heart, and I go to church, I practice tenets of Islam, and I also happen to be crazily in love with Krishna. So I do not need to kind of certify which religion I belong to, but there's definitely Islamophobia there. I think there are also issues around casteism. There is issue around geographies, around ethnicity, around the socio-economic status that one comes to. And these are equally important, if not paramount, issues. Like, I'll give you an example, and sorry if it takes 2 minutes more. Last year, when I was particularly searching for housing in Delhi, this was just before the communal riots hit out. And, forget the fact that I was trans woman and getting access to housing is anyways difficult. But being trans and having a Muslim name also double, triple, quadruple the issues that I would face in terms of getting safe and accessible housing. So all of these factors are very important. So you cannot really say and go with a straight-jacketed approach and say that, okay, my organization hits the top scores when it comes to LGBTIQ inclusion. But how do we also look at the issues of caste, historically marginalized groups, geographically marginalized groups, whether they are coming from insurgency affected areas, if they are not from tier 1 or A universities, what do we do with B university, C university, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 cities? And I believe that your D&I agenda, as it slowly starts maturing, will have to look at these issues, because I believe that multiculturalism as an issue will only gain prominence because look at our own socio-political climate around you. We are much more heightened than we were 5 years ago. That gives us impetus to believe that multiculturalism issues and intersectionality issues will have to be looked in from a very different perspective. And with this, I need to ask you, Suresh, 2 questions before we and maybe one thing, commending companies for the stuff that they are doing right in terms of intersectionality and LGBT, and one thing that that you would like them to improvise or change, and also from a recruiting context. Is there something that you would like to say before we wrap up this session?
Sure, Zainab. I think I sort of touched on it, but I will dwell on it a little more. So, one, I said, like I said, the thing that they're doing right is certainly, thinking more about diversity, right? So, that intent has to be there, which certainly seems to be uh, quite prevalent all across the industries. I mean, generally, when you see, Pride Month, you see a lot of Indian companies, willing to, associate themselves with the LGBT community, which itself is a big change from how things were maybe a few years back. So I would say the intent for the companies to be more inclusive is certainly there. They are refining their diversity and inclusion agenda. So DNI as such, the intent part is what they are getting right, but on when it comes to actions, I think there is still a lot of ground to cover. uh, and these could be in the form of when it comes to inclusion, uh, whether it's inclusion surveys. A lot of people in the from the LGBT community may not necessarily feel included in the team environments because the and the language spoken by some of their colleagues might display an unconscious bias against the LGBT community, right? So that for that to go away, there has to be more training and more awareness created amongst the workforce in various companies. That is one. Two, especially on say on especially with specific regard to trans people, I would say there is so much more to be done, and I have generally come to realize that while I used to think that my life as a gay person has been difficult, as I've worked closely with the LGBT community in with some of the NGOs in Chennai, my realization has been the average life of a trans person is far more difficult, right? So companies can do a lot more to support them, in the sense that whether it's when if somebody is choosing to transition right from one sex to the other, one gender to the other, then it's a big process. It would need medical help, it would need financial help, it would also need psychological counseling. So these are areas that companies can come forward and help out individuals, and of course leave to go with that, right? So these are some of the areas. Inclusion, greater opportunities for trans people is something I feel companies can do much more about.
Thank you so much, Suresh. Just in terms of timing and closing remarks, I just wanted to say that, as I sit and reflect on our fireside chat, and I think about what can be done, obviously breaking some of the structural and institutional aspects around racism, sexism, and which also includes toxic masculinity or toxic, other detrimental issues are a major step in the right direction. But in terms of for those who have to deal with these pressures on a daily basis, we need to also suggest that, acceptance will come from different quarters, but you need to kind of prep yourself for it. And also believe that, people who are attending this call and the knowledge and the awareness that they are imbibing from these sessions, I would want to say that with greater knowledge comes greater responsibility. While the world is hard on us minorities, and we may have some of the ability to change it, but the fact that addressing some of these issues, which are structural issues, to 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 kind of change a much larger discourse around promoting rational attitudes towards gender, sex, sexuality, will not really happen. So thank you all of you all for making time and listening in to us, and with this hope that while you go back to your organizations and to your workspaces, you will start a new dialogue on looking at LGBTIQ issues from the lens of intersectionality. Thank you, and signing off.
Thank you, Zainab. It's really been a pleasure talking to you.